Hello, this is my Inspired Discoveries project. Can money and politics coexist peacefully? My name is Hugh Norko. I am a senior at the University of Baltimore, and my major is jurisprudence, which is sort of a combination between philosophy and law and ethics and government. So naturally, I want to show an interdisciplinary project to you guys. So for my philosophy class, I had to read Spheres of Justice by Michael Walzer. Walzer's mission was to develop a theory of distributive justice which recognized how pluralistic, complex, and diverse society was. According to Walzer, modern society is composed of different spheres, different parts of life which disperse their own social goods: money in the business sphere, healthcare in the health sphere, grace in religion, etc. Whether these spheres distributed justice depended on what criteria each sphere distributes these rewards. The healthcare market, for example, is just if the sphere of healthcare is distributed according to need. Business is just if money is distributed according to the value you produce. And grace in religion is just if it's distributed according to piety, etc. Each of these institutions is different from society to society. Humans, as social creatures, give meaning to what criteria each sphere requires to obtain a social good. Justice, then, is when someone is able to access the goods of one sphere using criteria which shouldn't translate into rewards. Walzer uses the formula, no social good X should be distributed to men and women who possess some other good Y merely because they possess Y and without regard to the meaning of X. This means while you can buy goods and services with money fairly, you shouldn't be able to buy healthcare with money only. In the same vein, your level of piety shouldn't be giving you more access to goods and services in the marketplace. That is his conception of what injustice is. If you use one good from one sphere to buy stuff you shouldn't in the other sphere. What intrigued me about Walzers philosophy is that for an undergrad like me, it's surprisingly accessible. We define these spheres and social goods in our own American culture. We are all entrenched in these healthcare, market, and religious debates. His philosophy allows anyone to become part of the philosophical debate because we all create the social meanings of what it means to be a fair healthcare, religious, or market debate. Last year, I did a research paper looking at the correlation between fundraising and voting advantage gained for Baltimore City state candidates. While the results of the research were interesting on their own, I realized that some of the conclusions I found in that paper could be inserted into the debate about money and politics using Walzer's framework. Therefore, the topic of this presentation will be to show how we can all contribute to philosophical debates about justice through the work that we do, even if it's not our intention to write a philosophical paper. To show this, I will use my non-philosophical paper to try to come to some conclusions about money in the political sphere. To start, we have some intuitions about how offices in the political sphere should be distributed. We know that office deserves to go to the most qualified, the most experienced, the most representative, etc. So when we say something like buying office with money, this goes immediately against our intuition because money shouldn't be a criteria for selecting political candidates. But that's actually a complicated preposition. What does buying money or buying office mean? What constitutes buying an office? Unsurprisingly, this is an ongoing debate in our political system today. So to simplify this topic, I will use Citizens United versus the FEC to constitute the both sides of the debate. According to the opinion of the court, limiting a corporation's ability to spend money is unconstitutional because it limits the ability of its members to associate effectively in speech on political issues. The rationale is that the First Amendment purposely keeps the government from interfering with the marketplace of ideas and rationaling speech. Basically, it's not up to the courts or Congress to create a sense of fairness by restricting speech or money in politics. Now, obviously, the dissenting opinion agrees. They use the reasoning that the distorting effect of large corporate expenditures constitutes a risk of corruption or the appearance of corruption. Justice Stevens' famous quote says that a democracy cannot function effectively when its constituent members believe that laws are being bought and sold. So as we can see, one side thinks that money is a legitimate part of the political process, that money is speech, and the other side doesn't. So the question becomes, does money corrupt the political sphere? Now, this is actually an empirical question now. If money is seen as giving advantage to certain candidates without regard to anything else, then we can probably conclude that it is corrupting to the political sphere. But if money doesn't necessarily correlate to an advantage to the candidates, and that it represents something more complicated, then we may be inclined to say that, as the opinion of the court said, money is a legitimate part of the process, and it may just be speech. So I looked at my paper and saw what conclusions I came to about a year ago when I wrote it. What I found in my research was that the correlation of money raised and advantage to vote share was not so clear. Instead, I found a number of interesting other conclusions. One, I found that fundraising and the money gained from fundraising represents the skill and support of the candidate, which is, most people would say, a legitimate criteria for electing qualified candidates. If a candidate is skillful enough to gain a large coalition of fundraising voters, then that must mean they're qualified enough to do other things important in the office. I also found that money raised follows support, not the other way around. Basically, the more popular you are, the more money you get because most people know you and want to contribute to you. This may justify the money as speech argument since people support popular candidates with money, therefore money may be speech. However, that doesn't mean that money in politics is completely harmful. I also found that money is often used to deter qualified challengers, which goes against the criteria of who deserves office more. If money is deterring qualified challengers, that means that people who normally should get a shot at running for office don't. So how can we interpret these findings philosophically? The conclusion I came to was that money seems to correlate with the skill and the popularity of the candidate, but doesn't necessarily buy an advantage not relating to skill or popularity. Now, this isn't a breach of our intuition about one's qualification for office. If a candidate is the most skilled and the most possible or popular, then he should probably win. However, in one aspect, money did breach this intuition in another way, since many qualified contenders are not able to effectively challenge an incumbent just because they haven't raised enough money. This goes against our intuition of the most qualified candidate in office, because if contenders cannot challenge incumbents effectively because of money, then it is corrupting the political sphere. So from these conclusions, we can come to some philosophical conclusions about the nature of money in politics and the political sphere. Basically, it is entirely possible that money in politics may not be the problem itself, but there could be other structural imbalances which impact the way we see fairness in the political process, such as the unfair advantage that incumbents get. In America also, at the very least, money may be a legitimate tool to represent speech, but there should be other imbalances to be addressed, as I hope my research pointed out. Now, obviously, my short research paper is not the final word on the topic, and there's a ton of more research and analysis and perspectives that need to be considered before I can come anywhere near close to a conclusion on this matter. But I hope to show that we can integrate all kinds of research and empirical studies into some of the most relevant philosophical debates of our time. Walzer makes philosophy accessible.